So we're here to talk about a controversial subject, if you like, Peter, particularly given our background. That is the death of the industry IT analyst nigh, or are we on the cusp of a resurgence, a renaissance in many ways? Because every time this industry hits a new computing wave, some pundit comes along and says, well, that's it. That's the end of the IT analyst as we know it. We saw Google, we saw Yahoo search engines come along. And I was at Gartner at the time, and many pundits were saying this is going to cast a death knell for IT research firms. We can get everything on Google, Peter. Why do we need analysts at the end of the day? And I think at the end of the day, when we think about that, you can see other eras, the dot-com boom, Google and Yahoo, as I mentioned. We saw the dot-com crash. We've seen cloud. Now we say AI. We now see quantum. But what is the impact on this wonderful industry, which has fed and watered you and I for quite some time now, Peter? Is it all doom and gloom, do you think?
Well, Matt, let's start with the perspective, why did analysts emerge? And they emerged because the IT industry is complex, it's changing. People need some independent, objective opinion about what's going on. And so analysts came as a way of providing independent advice. Mm-hmm. So has that advice been superseded is what we may be asking.
Yeah, I'd question that. I think also if you go way back, I think to the very early days of when the IT sort of research firms really started carving out a niche for themselves. You can think back to the wonderful magic quadrant as we know it. Vendors love or hate it. Organizations tend to set their budgets by that kind of thing as well.
That's an interesting thing. Now, I'm sorry on this because I know this is very personal to you, Matt, but I remember when you raised that when we first met at the place we now work, and I was joined by the late, great Graham Phillipson, and both of us poo-pooed the concept of the magic quadrant, thinking it was some sort of contrived a device or creation. And you very vehemently pushed back about the independence that went into it, the intention to detail, the integrity in the model. So there was a lot of good stuff being done in those days about trying to give people some view of what's going on in the marketplace.
And it goes right back to the early 90s, when in many ways the IT industry was somewhat fledgling. Yeah. And we're still very much in that mainframe era. There was a lot going on, but a lot of organizations were it was almost like black magic, in many ways. But, the point you made, I remember that conversation very well with you and our dear friend, Mr. Phillipson. And, yes, I was kind of quite vehemently pushing back. And this is as an ex-Gartner person as well, because I've kind of lived and breathed that whole kind of environment of the Magic Quadrant, and the work that goes into it takes months and months. I remember, and I will not name the vendor, one particular vendor who literally spent millions of dollars with Gartner. And basically the CEO at the time said, I'm not happy where you've got me on the quadrant. I think they'd moved like that much.
Yeah.
Basically barely moved an inch, but they weren't where they were. And they cancelled everything. And this was millions of dollars. And Gartner said, well, so be it. That's fair enough. So when I hear people saying, it's all contrived, there's a bit of, pay for play here, believe me, there isn't. And I'm not here to defend Gartner or anything. I think I'm here defending the analysts that do this research, Peter, because
the integrity
it's their
of them.
Integrity and their objectivity, which is key here.
Well, then why is But I think, you both have said we've lived on the coin of the analyst work for a long time. Both of us had pretty comfortable lives as a result of that. But the value proposition is being challenged in the way that every business model is being challenged by technology and by AI. I mean, people would pay millions for the advice of Gartner to have seats, not one person, but a few people able to access those resources and pick people's brains, the briefings that came out of them, the conferences that were obtained through them. All of that they valued and paid a lot of money. But now, can they charge the same amount in the modern world is the real task for them. Mm-hmm. Because what we're seeing on the share market, we're seeing some lack of confidence that the operating model of the research companies has got life in it.
Yeah, and therein lies the question. So welcome to Boon or Bust. We've kind of kicked things right off here as we get into discussing the future of the IT research industry as we know it in general. So, Peter, let me come back and pick up on a comment you made there about the stock price in general. And it's not just, we don't want to pick on one particular vendor. You can look at Forrester's in the same boat as well. We've seen stock markets get hammered. And I don't think it's necessarily because of their impending lack of relevance.
Yeah.
I think it's because of their slowness to adopt AI themselves. So to adopt the technology that can deliver their insights and perspectives back much more quickly and effectively. Because I was speaking to a very senior marketing person, and if she's listening, she'll know who she is. There are actually two of them. We had a lovely lunch in Sydney a few weeks ago, and the point that they made was that now that they've kind of put the tools or the AI wrapper around their research portal and research capabilities, it really is quite powerful. So I would argue that it's not necessarily that AI is making research content irrelevant, it's making how research is delivered irrelevant.
Well, I'd go slightly farther than that, Matt. I would say certain content is not as valued as it might have been in the past, but other content is probably more appreciated. So you can use AI perhaps to give a wider, broader perspective on something. Whereas in the past you might have presented facts or figures about something. Now you can sort of give a much more forward-looking view of things, and AI could create those scenarios for you that will enable you to do it.
It can,
But I do think, Matt, there's one thing I do want to check.
Yeah.
I think it's ironic, isn't it, that the industry, the firms talking about the potential of technology are reticent to take up the technology itself.
Yes.
Because we all have a sense of our own comfort zones.
We do.
You know,
and also because the perceived threat that has on their industry.
Yeah.
So I think coming back to what we said right at the start of this was that, AI is seen as, an existential threat, or was, to many of these firms, right? But at the end of the day, those who have embraced it have now seen it can actually make them far more powerful. Because who wants to go and trawl through 1,000 PDFs to find an answer at the end of the day? But I think the challenge was that, or the fear was that if we put all of this into an LLM, then we've given away the crown jewels, right? But we haven't. We've made the crown jewels richer and enabled people to access them more easily.
But we need to change what we deliver as analysts.
Of course we do.
Just giving the report on something isn't going to cut it in the modern world. We need to give something that's a value add.
We do, and that's why I think, you and I both work for Adapt, research and advisory company here in Australia. And that's one of the things I think we've really focused on over the last couple of years is how do we differentiate? And we differentiate by making it locally relevant to other organisations, but also coming back to that AI piece as well. We've had internal conversations that AI could kill us here, right?
Yeah.
Because all the information's out there. But absolutely not. When you look at how we've you and I as analysts and with the company we work for as well, we've embraced AI to help us deliver insights much more rapidly and effectively to customers. And I think that's the piece which we're not kind of really talking enough about.
Well, Matt, I've got to credit you because I think you were much more forward-looking in the embrace of AI than I was. I took some time to get enthused about it, and you were pushing and prodding and pushing me. Come up here, it's going to be useful. And I've come around definitely to the view that there are certain tasks definitely where AI is going to save me a lot of drudgery and help me focus on things that are going to be more creative and more value for the person I'm doing assignment for.
Yeah, and I was reading an article yesterday actually about this, Peter, and the comment that was being made in there was that, and actually stepping back, what this author wrote some time ago now was that the ending of physical maps, so we see Google Maps come into play, a number of years ago, the author, this woman, she said ultimately she predicted in 20 years just getting away from us reading physical maps and using computers to navigate, that kind of thing, was going to have a significant impact on cognitive decline as people aged. And the conversational comment in this recent article went on to say that the challenge with AI is if we let it do everything, if we let it do our thinking, then ultimately, sure, when you're 25, it won't matter, right? But when you're 70, and you've been doing that for 45 years, I'm talking about the 25-year-olds of today, potentially their level of cognitive decline could be a major future challenge. So the point I make is that as we're looking at Gen AI particularly, how can it, to your point, reduce the drudgery? And how can it help us sharpen our thinking? So think first, use AI to sharpen that thinking, but also in this article, the author was saying, use AI to question your thinking.
Well, It's interesting, Matt, because we're about to talk on a topic where I'm going to introduce a new term that many people may not have been heard of, a term called friction maxing. Now, I know we promised when we set up Boon or Bust, we're going to cut through all the jargon and all the hype.
I think you promised $100 to anybody who called you out on that.
I did. There was going to be a technological clanger, gobbledygook clanger. So share with me. Don't find me, please. But I'm going to introduce a term in our next episode about this concept of friction maxing, what it means, when is technology good to use, and when maybe our lives better if we don't use it.
Yeah, it's also, I think, sort of building on that a bit more, Peter, in terms of the conversation here. When we kind of think about that future, and we talked about the impact of AI, for example, I would say there's so much confusion generally out there in the market. We've talked about this to death, so we don't need to go into that. That the role of the analyst, the independent analyst, is more critical than ever, because you will say this over and over again. There's so much hype out there. Every vendor's an AI company, right?
And everyone wants to sell something to you.
Indeed, everyone wants to sell something to you. So we still need that kind of man and woman in the middle.
Yeah.
One thing, keeping the vendors honest.
Yeah.
And secondly, giving us the truth as it should be, not what we think we should hear.
And Matt, we all know money talks. So it's harder than ever for the independent analyst to maintain that sort of independence and objectivity. But I take your point. It's it's essential in a world which is being increasingly driven by technology, that we need that independent voice to give us some perspectives to help guide us through the challenges.
We do, and we need to keep having the conversations. I think that's a critical thing. So you and I we do a lot of roundtables every year. Peter probably got a notch for each one on our arm, right? But we do a lot of roundtables with senior leaders. We do a lot of events. We do panels. We do speaking engagements, all this kind of thing with Adapt through the year. And what we typically find is that out of those conversations comes perspectives you can never get from AI. At the end of the day. And we don't write them down. This is another thing with analysts. We always say that 20% of what we know is on the PDF. 20% of what we know is in the article. 80%'s up here.
Yeah.
So that's why the conversations are so critical. And that's something AI will never replace.
We can never replace the power of osmosis, can we, Matt? So all those gems of wisdom that we hear from people, they go in our brains as analysts, and they give us some sort of enriched view of the world.
Yeah, we don't, when we talk about, we talked about AI, we talked about cloud before that. Now we've got quantum coming down the track as well. And I want to use that as a specific example, Peter, because
it's a scary example because we're all wrestling with AI.
We are, indeed, that's right. And there was a announcement at CES last year when Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, I'm not casting any aspersions on him because he's a brilliant man, amazing man, and has done some amazing things. But he got up on stage and said, quantum's 15 to 20 years away. This was last year. And I said to you, well, I remember listening to a lot of industry experts here, people like Claudine Ogilvy, who was really studying quantum very, very heavily. And she was saying we need to be preparing now because we're 3 or 4 years away from when it will start becoming implementable and almost ready for real time. So he said 15 to 20 years ago. I said, of course he'd say that. What's potentially the biggest threat to AI? Quantum, right? If you don't get things right. But now, of course, as we got through to the middle of last year, it's I think we've reached a sort of tipping point with quantum right now in terms of available. And we heard again this year they've just released NVIDIA released a product to actually help you leverage AI more effectively to get the best benefits out of quantum.
And Matt, didn't it do wonders for the NVIDIA share price when he made the announcement? Actually, I think we're ready to use it.
It did. And then when indeed it did. That's right. But I think the point here is that, again, I called that out a year ago. Yeah. I questioned that comment. And I think we had the CEO of SAP was kind of disagreeing with Jensen at that point as well. I called it out. I said, I think perhaps we're being a little bit too pessimistic here in general. But that's where the analyst role comes in, right? And to be able to call things out when they should be called out.
Well, I'm getting back to sort of the integrity and the insight of your former company Gartner, the Gartner hype model. And now let's look at quantum computing. We're at the start of that hype really now. We're going to get super hyped up over the next few years before we realize there's a lot of things we don't know about it, before we hit that trough of disillusionment and get to the plateau of productivity. So there's a few years to that plateau of productivity.
So as an analyst, I'd be saying, you need to plan for quantum, obviously, but you need to get AI right first. That would be my very basic advice at the end of the day. So I think the point here is, Peter, that when we sort of wrap this session up, and I think we've had a good argy-bargy here in general, is that I still believe that these technology changes do not spell the death knell for the IT analyst or the IT industry. I'm not just saying that because I'm in it, because I'm probably won't be in it that much longer, Peter. But the point here is that it's not the death knell of that. It's the death knell of how insights are delivered.
Well, and you need to change your operating model. That's really what we're saying. And that's always the case with technology. Technology disrupts one way of working, but we've got to rethink about how we change that working model, because in the analyst case, there is value in that independent advice.
There is. And don't expect people are going to continue to spend millions and millions of dollars, Peter, without getting real insights and advice back for that.
You won't have to read any PDFs in the future.
That's right. Sorry, Adobe. All right. Thank you very much.